In the gleaming towers of the Galactic Entertainment Syndicate, chief designer Vex Morbach stood before the most ambitious project of his career, his scaled hands trembling, with what he told himself was excitement rather than terror. The holographic display before him pulsed with ominous red warnings, each one representing another delightfully deadly feature of his masterpiece. "Pip, come look at this beautiful nightmare we've created," Vex called to his colleague, his forked tongue flicking out nervously. Systems engineer Pip Gleasel scuttled over on 6 spindly legs, all 12 of his compound eyes focusing on the display with the kind of horrified fascination usually reserved for traffic accidents. "Oh, good. The acid rain parameters are finally stable. It should now dissolve organic matter in under 30 seconds. 30 seconds? Vex's tail lashed with disapproval. "That's practically leisurely. What kind of Deathworld are we running here, a spa retreat?" The simulation before them was officially designated Omega Crucible, though the development team had taken to calling it the Widowmaker, after it had traumatized 3 separate AI testing protocols into requesting early retirement. It was classified as a Class 15 Deathworld, which meant it existed at the theoretical limit of planetary hostility. Anything beyond Class 15 was considered mathematically impossible by galactic scientific consensus. The planet's surface was a masterwork of lethality. Acid rain fell in sheets from a sky the color of infected wounds, while the ground itself writhed with carnivorous flora that could sense a heartbeat from 3 kilometers away. Gravitational anomalies dotted the landscape like invisible landmines, ready to compress anything unlucky enough to wander too close into a cube roughly the size of a sugar packet. "The atmosphere composition is perfect," Pip chittered, consulting his datapad. "Toxic enough to kill most species in minutes, but not so toxic that they die before experiencing the full horror of what we've built." The wildlife was Vex's particular pride and joy. He'd designed creatures that hunted in coordinated packs of 50, each individual possessed of more teeth than seemed physically possible. The apex predator, which he'd modestly named the Vexorian Nightmare Beast, stood 3 meters tall and had the charming habit of keeping its prey alive for days while slowly consuming non-vital organs. "The beta testing results from the simulation AIs are very encouraging," Pip reported, his antenna twitching with satisfaction. "Complete psychological breakdown in under 4 hours, followed by desperate pleas to be deleted from existence." Marketing Director QL Stoomwhisper materialized beside them in a swirl of purple smoke, because dramatic entrances were apparently written into his species' genetic code. His 3 heads spoke in unison, which was unsettling even by galactic standards. "Gentlemen, I bring magnificent news," the heads chorused. "Pre-orders for Omega Crucible viewing rights have exceeded all projections. Every major species in the galaxy wants to watch their enemies attempt this simulation and fail spectacularly." Vex allowed himself a moment of pride. Creating entertainment through others' suffering wasn't exactly noble work, but it paid well and came with excellent health benefits. "How many species have actually volunteered to attempt the simulation?" "None yet," Kyox admitted, his enthusiasm dimming slightly. "But that's the beauty of it. We don't need volunteers when we can simply market it as the ultimate test of species superiority. Someone's bound to take the bait eventually." As if summoned by the universe's twisted sense of irony, the facility's reception AI chimed with an incoming visitor request. The holographic display showed a small delegation requesting access to the testing facility. "Well, speak of the devil," Pip muttered, zooming in on the visitor manifest. "We have our first potential victims. Let me see here. They're called humans, apparently. Never heard of them." Vex consulted the galactic species database, his expression growing puzzled. "Classification shows them as moderate threat level 3. That's barely above the fluffy blob people of Serenity Prime. What could they possibly want with a Class 15 simulation?" "Maybe they're lost," Chaos suggested hopefully. "Or perhaps they're here to surrender preemptively. I respect that kind of forward thinking." Little did they know they were about to receive an education in why the universe had a sense of humor, and why that sense of humor was apparently vindictive, twisted, and had a particular fondness for cosmic irony. The doors to the testing facility slid open with a pneumatic hiss, and 3 figures strolled in with the casual confidence of people who had never encountered a problem they couldn't either fight, analyze, or ignore until it went away. Captain Rex Boldstone led the group, his chest puffed out like a parade balloon and his smile bright enough to power a small space station. Behind him walked Dr. Luna Haxworth, whose wild hair suggested she'd either been experimenting with electrical fields or had simply given up on conventional grooming standards. Bringing up the rear was Sergeant Bull Ironside, a man so solidly built he appeared to have been carved from granite by someone who believed subtlety was for weaklings. "Greetings, fellow sentient beings," Rex announced, his voice carrying the kind of enthusiastic boom usually reserved for motivational speakers and people trying to sell you life insurance. "We heard you folks built yourselves a fancy survival simulation. Mind if we take a look?" Vex blinked his reptilian eyes slowly, a gesture that in his species indicated either deep contemplation or the onset of a migraine. "You want to look at our Class 15 Deathworld simulation? As in observe it from a safe distance through reinforced viewing windows?" "Oh no," Luna interjected, pulling out a tablet that looked suspiciously jury-rigged. "We want to test it. Actually participate, get our hands dirty, experience the full sensory nightmare you've so carefully crafted." Pip's 12 eyes performed what could only be described as a synchronized feint. "Test it? But you're threat level 3S. The simulation is designed to eliminate threat level 12 species within minutes." Bull shrugged, a gesture so casual it somehow made the room's temperature drop by several degrees. "Yeah, we looked at your specs on the way over. Seems like a nice change of pace. Been a while since we had a proper challenge." "A change of pace?" Koyalk's three heads spoke in horrified unison. "This simulation represents the absolute pinnacle of environmental hostility. It's the most dangerous scenario ever conceived by galactic science." Rex nodded politely. "That's real nice. So when do we start?" The aliens exchanged glances that could have been classified as their own form of interspecies communication. It was the kind of look shared by people who were beginning to suspect they'd accidentally invited a hurricane to a picnic. "Perhaps," Vex said carefully, "you'd like to review the simulation parameters first. Just to make sure you understand what you're volunteering for." Luna's eyes lit up with the kind of dangerous enthusiasm usually seen in mad scientists and people about to make very poor life choices. "Oh, absolutely. Show us everything." The holographic display materialized between them, showing the acid rain, the gravity wells, the carnivorous plants, and the pack-hunting nightmare beasts in all their terrible glory. The aliens watched the humans' faces, waiting for the inevitable expressions of horror and immediate requests to leave. Instead, Bull squinted at the display and scratched his chin thoughtfully. "So it's like camping in Australia, but with less deadly stuff?" "Less deadly?" Pip's voice cracked like a teenager asking someone to prom. "Those creatures have acid for blood and hunt in coordinated groups of 50. 50's a pretty small pack," Bull observed. "Back home, fire ants work in colonies of 500,000, and they're just the annoying ones." Rex was nodding along enthusiastically. "This looks fantastic, very atmospheric. I love what you've done with the toxic sky. Really sets the mood." "The mood it sets," Vex said weakly, "is impending doom followed by agonizing death." "Right," Rex agreed. "Atmospheric." The aliens were beginning to experience what psychologists would later classify as reality displacement syndrome, though at the time they simply felt like the universe was playing an elaborate practical joke on them. 20 minutes later, the humans were suited up in the facility's best protective gear, which they wore with the enthusiasm of people being forced to put on extra sweaters in summer. The aliens huddled around the observation deck like nervous parents watching their children's first day of school, if that school happened to be a meat grinder disguised as an educational institution. "Final systems check," Vex announced, his voice shaking only slightly. "All lethal parameters are active. Acid rain is at maximum corrosivity. Gravity wells are primed, and the nightmare beasts are particularly hungry today." "Sounds perfect," Rex called out cheerfully. "Luna, you got your sample containers?" "Packed and ready," Luna replied, hefting a collection bag that looked suspiciously like something she'd borrowed from a grocery store. "I'm hoping to get some of that acid rain for analysis. It might make a decent cleaning solution." Bull cracked his knuckles with sounds like small explosions. "Finally, some exercise equipment that fights back." The simulation chamber sealed with a hiss that sounded remarkably like the universe taking a deep breath before witnessing something unprecedented. The humans materialized inside the hellscape, and immediately the sky opened up with acid rain that could dissolve titanium in under a minute. Rex looked up at the falling death drops and smiled. "Oh, that's refreshing. Reminds me of that sulfuric geyser field back in Yellowstone. Remember that camping trip, Bull? The one where you said the air was spicy?" Bull nodded, letting the acid rain run off his helmet like it was a light spring shower. "Good times." Meanwhile, Dr. Luna Haxworth was practically dancing in the corrosive precipitation, The chemical composition is fascinating. It's like they took every toxic compound in the periodic table and invited them to a party. Pip's antennae were vibrating so hard they created a small buzzing noise. They should be screaming by now. Their protective suits should be dissolving. About those suits, Vex said slowly, checking his readings. They appear to be functioning perfectly despite environmental conditions that should have reduced them to component atoms. What the aliens didn't know was that human protective equipment was designed for environments where the rain was occasionally literal fire, and the local wildlife included creatures that could bite through tank armor. By those standards, mere acid rain was practically a bubble bath. The carnivorous plants sensed the approaching humans and began their deadly dance, vines whipping through the air with enough force to decapitate most galactic species. Rex walked straight through them like he was pushing through a beaded curtain. "Neat botanical display," he commented, as a plant the size of a small building tried to wrap him in thorned tentacles. "Very interactive." Bull paused next to what the simulation classified as the Devourer of Souls, a plant capable of digesting its prey while keeping them conscious for the entire process. He gave it an experimental shake. "Sturdy construction. Mind if I do a few pull-ups?" Before anyone could answer, he was hanging from the plant's main vine, doing chin-ups while the Devourer of Souls made confused whimpering sounds that no plant should have been capable of producing. "This is impossible," Kallax whispered, all three of his heads speaking at different octaves, creating an eerie harmony of disbelief. "They're treating our instruments of terror like playground equipment." The pack of 50 nightmare beasts appeared on the horizon, their coordinated hunting call echoing across the landscape like the screams of the damned. They charged toward the humans with the kind of precision that came from millions of years of evolution dedicated to the art of murder. Rex waved at them cheerfully. "Oh look, we've got company. Anyone bring snacks?" Luna rummaged in her pack and produced what appeared to be standard human field rations. "I've got some sandwiches. Think they'd like peanut butter and jelly?" She tossed a sandwich toward the approaching pack. The lead nightmare beast caught it, took an experimental bite, and immediately sat down like a well-trained dog. The rest of the pack followed suit, their terrifying hunting formation dissolving into what could only be described as an impromptu picnic. "What just happened?" Vex's voice had climbed several octaves. "Apparently," Pip said faintly, "human food is more terrifying than our apex predators." The simulation's AI began broadcasting increasingly desperate warnings. "Alert. Participants are not following established death protocols. Alert. Environmental hazards are being ignored. Nightmare beasts have been domesticated with products." Rex looked up at the nearest sensor array. "Is that normal? The computer sounds a little stressed." "A little stressed?" Pip's voice cracked. "It's having an existential crisis. I've never seen an AI question its entire purpose before." Luna was now taking geological samples while standing directly in a gravity well that should have compressed her into a singularity. Instead, she was making notes about interesting spatial distortions and potential applications for compact storage solutions. Bull had somehow convinced 3 nightmare beasts to play fetch, using chunks of carnivorous plants as throwing sticks. The beasts were wagging appendages that definitely weren't tails but were serving the same function. "This is my life's work," Vex said hollowly, watching his ultimate challenge, being treated like a relaxing nature walk. 20 years of research into the most hostile environment possible, and they're having a picnic. "Look on the bright side," Rex called out, having discovered that the toxic atmosphere made his voice carry really well. "This is great team-building exercise, very immersive." What happened next could only be described as the most desperate act of professional pride in galactic history. Vex's scaled hands flew across his control console like a peonist having a seizure, his forked tongue flicking out in concentration as sweat beaded on his reptilian brow. "Emergency protocol activation," he hissed through gritted teeth. "I'm implementing the Omega contingency." "The Omega contingency?" Pip's compound eyes bulged in horror. "But that's theoretical. We never finished testing it. It could destabilize the entire simulation matrix." "I don't care if it destabilizes reality itself," Vex snarled, his professional dignity hanging by a thread thinner than quantum foam. "These humans are not going to make 20 years of my research look like a children's playground." The simulation environment began to shift and warp as new horrors materialized. The sky cracked open like a broken egg, revealing a swirling vortex of volcanic lightning that struck the ground with enough force to vaporize small moons. The temperature spiked to levels that should have turned the atmosphere itself into plasma. Rex looked up at the display of cosmic fury with the expression of someone admiring particularly impressive fireworks. "Oh wow, They've got pyrotechnics, too. Very professional setup you folks have here. Pyrotechnics? Vex's voice climbed to frequencies only dolphins could hear. That's volcanic lightning, channeled through dimensional rifts. Each strike contains the energy of a small star going supernova. It's very pretty, Rex said sincerely. The colors are really something. Is that natural, or did you add some kind of filter? Meanwhile, Luna was pulling out what appeared to be a standard scientific calculator and pointing it at the lightning storms. The electromagnetic readings are off the charts. This is generating enough energy to power half of Earth for a year. Half of Earth? Pip screeched, his antennae practically vibrating off his head. Your entire planet? Oh no, sorry, Luna corrected cheerfully. I meant half of Earth during peak summer, when everyone's running air conditioning. During winter, it could probably power the whole thing. Vex activated the next phase of his desperate gambit. The ground beneath the humans began to ripple and twist as temporal distortions erupted across the landscape. Past and future versions of the simulation began bleeding through, creating a maze of contradictory realities where cause and effect had apparently decided to take a coffee break. Dr. Hacksworth paused mid-step, her scientific brain immediately recognizing what she was seeing. Oh, this is fascinating. Localized temporal displacement fields. You've essentially created pockets where different time streams intersect. She walked directly into one of the distortions and immediately began having an animated conversation with what appeared to be 3 other versions of herself from different timelines. Hello, me, the Luna from 10 minutes in the future said cheerfully. How's the acid rain analysis going? Quite well, me, present Luna replied, though I think we should warn past me about the dimensional creatures. What dimensional creatures? Asked past Luna, just as a being that existed in 17 dimensions simultaneously materialized behind her. Bull glanced over at the interdimensional entity, which resembled a cross between a geometric theorem and a fever dream, and nodded approvingly. Now, that's interesting. Hey there, buddy. The creature, which had been specifically designed to drive viewers insane through its impossible geometry, made what could only be described as a pleased purring sound, and began following Bull around like a pet. Within minutes, Bull was playing interdimensional fetch with it, throwing chunks of crystallized time that the creature would chase through folded space. This is impossible, Calix moaned, all 3 of his heads speaking in different languages to express the full depth of his despair. Temporal distortions should fragment their consciousness across multiple realities. Instead, Vex observed, with the hollow voice of a man watching his life's work crumble, they appear to be using it as an opportunity for peer consultation and exotic pet acquisition. The emergency meeting that followed could have been classified as its own form of entertainment. The Galactic Entertainment Syndicate's board of directors materialized via hologram, their various appendages, tentacles, and sensory organs, all focused on the impossible scene playing out in the simulation chamber. Director Zash Nightcrawler, whose species was known for their unflappable demeanor in crisis situations, appeared to be flapping quite vigorously. Explain to me how our most advanced death simulation has become what appears to be a casual nature documentary. The humans, Vex said weakly, seem to have evolved on a planet that makes our Class 15 Deathworld look like a luxury resort. That's impossible, board member Glork Tentaclewing declared, his 17 mouths speaking in unison. Our classification system goes up to Class 15. There is no Class 16. Marketing Director QALX pulled up the preliminary data they'd managed to gather about Earth while the humans were busy befriending interdimensional horrors. The readings that appeared on the holographic display caused several board members to experience what could only be described as synchronized fainting. According to our analysis, Kolek said in a voice barely above a whisper, their home planet registers as a Class 47 Deathworld. The silence that followed was so complete it had its own gravitational field. Class 47? Director Nightcrawler's voice cracked like ancient leather. Our mathematics don't even go that high. We thought Class 15 was the theoretical maximum for sustaining any form of life. Apparently, Pip said, watching Bull teach the interdimensional creature how to play what looked like 17-dimensional hopscotch, we were thinking too small. Back in the simulation, Rex had discovered that the volcanic lightning, when properly channeled through his suit's systems, provided excellent ambient lighting for the group photos he was taking. Luna had set up what appeared to be a small laboratory using crystallized time as work surfaces, and was conducting experiments that were making the simulation's physics engine cry softly to itself in a corner. Sir, the facility's main AI announced in a voice that sounded suspiciously like it was contemplating a career change. The humans have just asked if we have any marshmallows. Apparently they want to roast them using the dimensional fire rifts. Vex put his head in his hands and made a sound that was part sob, part laugh, and entirely defeated. 20 years, he whispered. 20 years I spent creating the ultimate challenge, and they want to make s'mores. The board of directors exchanged looks that transcended species barriers, united in their shared realization that they had fundamentally misunderstood something basic about the nature of survival, death, and the apparently limitless adaptability of creatures from a planet that shouldn't exist. What followed was perhaps the most humbling moment in galactic entertainment history. The mighty Galactic Entertainment Syndicate, creators of death simulations that had traumatized entire star systems, found themselves in the unprecedented position of asking for help from the very beings who had just turned their masterpiece into what appeared to be an interdimensional camping trip. Vex approached the humans with all the dignity he could muster, which at this point was roughly equivalent to a deflated party balloon trying to look presidential. "Esteemed humans," he began, his voice carrying the weight of professional defeat, "we find ourselves in need of your expertise." Rex looked up from where he was using volcanic lightning to charge his portable device, apparently unaware that the energy coursing through his hands could power a small city. "Oh, sure, happy to help. What do you need?" "We need," Vex swallowed what remained of his pride, "to know how to make this simulation actually challenging. For you." The three humans exchanged a look that contained approximately 17 different levels of amusement, most of which the aliens couldn't even begin to interpret. "Well," Luna said thoughtfully, powdering some crystallized time into a sample vial, "I suppose we could share a few suggestions based on, normal Tuesday weather back home." "Normal Tuesday weather?" Pip's voice had achieved frequencies that were technically classified as a weapon in some star systems. Bull scratched his chin contemplatively. "Yeah, nothing too dramatic. Maybe start with something basic like a Kansas spring day." "Kansas spring day," Vex repeated slowly, as if the words might make more sense if he said them carefully enough. "Sure," Rex nodded enthusiastically. Light tornado activity, maybe some baseball-sized hail, electrical storms with lightning that can melt sand into glass, the usual." The aliens stared at him with the expression of beings who were beginning to suspect that their entire understanding of meteorology had been fundamentally flawed. Luna pulled out her tablet and began sketching diagrams that looked like they'd been designed by a physicist having a nervous breakdown. "See, the thing about Kansas tornadoes is they're not just spinning air. They're basically atmospheric meat grinders that can pick up entire houses and drop them 3 counties over. The wind speeds reach about 300 miles per hour, which creates a vacuum effect that can make buildings explode from the inside out." "Explode from the inside out," Kaufs repeated faintly, his 3 heads speaking in a round where each head picked up where the last one left off, creating a disturbing echo effect. "Oh, and the lightning," Bull added helpfully. "It's not just regular lightning, it's superbolts. Each strike carries about 1 billion volts and can be seen from space. We use them to make glass art sometimes." "You use billion-volt lightning strikes to make art?" Vex's tail had started twitching in a way that suggested his nervous system was considering early retirement. "Well, not on purpose," Rex clarified. "But when life gives you lightning-melted sand sculptures, you might as well appreciate them." The humans continued their casual description of Earth weather with the enthusiasm of tour guides showing off local attractions. They explained how hurricanes were basically atmospheric buzzsaws that could span entire continents, how earthquakes could literally crack the planet's surface like an egg, and how winter in some places involved temperatures so cold that exposed skin would freeze solid in under 2 minutes. "And that's just the weather," Luna said brightly. "We haven't even gotten to the wildlife yet." "The wildlife," Pip whispered, as if saying it too loudly might summon something terrible. Bull nodded. "Back home, we've got these things called blue-ringed octopi. Cute little guys about the size of a golf ball. One bite contains enough venom to kill 26 adult humans, and there's no antidote." "Golf ball," Vex repeated mechanically. "That's one of the small ones," Rex added helpfully. "Then you've got your box jellyfish. Practically invisible in the water, tentacles can stretch up to 10 feet, and the sting causes pain so intense that victims often drown because they can't swim while screaming." "These the beaches where they live for vacation spots," Bull mentioned casually. The alien development team had progressed beyond simple horror into what psychologists would later term existential mathematics failure. They were trying to process the concept of a species that had evolved alongside creatures that made their carefully designed nightmare beasts look like therapy animals. "Your apex predators," Kallax managed to ask. "What are they like?" Oh, you mean like great whites? Luna said thoughtfully. They're basically living submarines with teeth, can grow up to 20 feet long, bite force of about 18,000 pounds per square inch, and they can launch themselves completely out of the water when attacking. We swim in the same oceans where they live. For fun, Rex added, because apparently the aliens weren't traumatized enough. But surely, Vex said desperately, you have safe spaces? Areas where these creatures don't exist? The humans looked at each other and burst into laughter, which was somehow more terrifying than any sound the simulation had managed to produce. Ha! Oh, that's a good one, Bull chuckled. You mean like Australia? Alicia is your safe space? Pip asked hopefully. Augalis is where we keep the things that are too dangerous for everywhere else, Rex explained. Spiders the size of dinner plates, snakes that can kill you by looking at you funny, and crocodiles that are basically living dinosaurs with anger management issues. The plants there are trying to kill you too, Luna added cheerfully. There's one called the Gimpy Gimpy that causes pain so intense it can last for months. People have committed suicide rather than deal with the stinging. And it's shaped like a regular leaf, Bull noted. Nature's got a real sense of humor. The simulation's main AI, which had been listening to this conversation, suddenly announced in a voice that sounded like it was reading its own obituary. System error. Threat assessment. Protocols require immediate revision. Current classification system inadequate for processing species designation. Pip stared at his console as numbers began cascading across the screen, each calculation making the situation progressively more impossible. According to our updated analysis, the difficulty rating for a standard Earth-based simulation would be, it's breaking our measurement system. The numbers are just displaying as crying face emoticons. That can't be right, Vex said weakly. Actually, Luna said, consulting her own readings, that sounds about right. You folks built a lovely little challenge here, but you were thinking too small. You need to embrace the chaos. Make it personal. Make it weird. Weird how? Vex asked, though his tone suggested he was already regretting the question. Rex grinned with the expression of someone about to share a favorite recipe. Well, back home we've got these things called Monday mornings. They're naturally occurring temporal anomalies that make you question your life choices and drain your will to live. Very effective. Or traffic jams, Bull suggested. Psychological warfare at its finest. Trap someone in a small space with a bunch of strangers, make them late for something important, and watch their sanity dissolve. Oh, and taxes, Luna added with scientific enthusiasm. A bureaucratic maze so complex that even the people who designed it don't understand how it works. It's like a puzzle where the solution changes every year and the penalty for getting it wrong is financial ruin. The aliens stared at them in the kind of silence usually reserved for funeral services or the moment when you realize you've made a terrible mistake. You want us to add bureaucracy to our death simulation? Calix asked in a voice that suggested his grasp on reality was becoming increasingly theoretical. Trust us, Rex said with the confidence of someone who had never met a problem he couldn't solve with enthusiasm and questionable judgment. Nothing breaks the human spirit quite like having to fill out forms in triplicate for a permit to apply for permission to request a license. 3 weeks later, the Galactic Entertainment Syndicate found themselves in the bizarre position of hosting what could only be described as the most successful product launch in galactic history, for all the wrong reasons. The newly redesigned Omega Crucible Human Edition had been unveiled to the galaxy with great fanfare, featuring improvements that the humans had suggested with the casual helpfulness of people recommending a good restaurant. The updated simulation now included Monday morning temporal anomalies, bureaucratic maze sublevels, and weather patterns that had required the development team to invent entirely new categories of mathematical terror. The response from potential participants across the galaxy had been immediate and unanimous. Absolutely not. We withdraw our challenge. Please remove our species from all future consideration. We're changing our classification to peaceful philosophers and moving to a nice quiet corner of the universe. The Zephyrian Empire, who had previously boasted about conquering 17 different star systems, took one look at the updated simulation specs and immediately surrendered to a species of sentient flowers. The Mechanical Collective, beings of pure logic and steel, experienced what could only be described as a group anxiety attack and requested therapy sessions. Director Nightcrawler stood before the now empty viewing galleries, his various appendages drooping with the weight of cosmic irony. In 30 years of entertainment production, I have never seen an entire galaxy collectively decide that something was too terrifying to attempt. Sir, the facility's AI announced, its voice now carrying what sounded suspiciously like post-traumatic stress, we've received 47,000 refund requests in the past hour. Several species have asked if we offer significantly easier alternatives, such as sleeping peacefully in a nice meadow or doing gentle breathing exercises. But the universe, as it turned out, had one final twist in store for the beleaguered entertainment executives. The humans, who had inadvertently destroyed the galaxy's most ambitious project, had somehow become the solution to their problems. Rex Boldstone found himself sitting in what had once been Vex's office, now serving as the chief difficulty consultant for the Galactic Entertainment Syndicate. His first official act had been to declare that all previous threat classifications needed to be adjusted downward to account for realistic expectations. "You see," Rex explained to a gathering of entertainment executives from across the galaxy, "the problem wasn't that your simulation was too easy. The problem was that you were thinking about survival all wrong." Dr. Luna Haxworth had been appointed head of environmental design, a position she had accepted with the enthusiasm of someone being given access to the universe's largest laboratory. Her first project involved creating what she called gentle challenge scenarios for beginners, which included simulations like slightly overcast day with mild breeze and light drizzle with adequate umbrella coverage. "The key," Luna explained to a group of terrified alien developers, "is to start small. Maybe begin with something non-lethal like a pop quiz or having to parallel park in a slightly tight space." Bull Ironside had become the galaxy's first interspecies fitness trainer, though his definition of a basic workout routine had required the installation of multiple therapy stations throughout the facility. His introductory class, light stretching and maybe a short walk, had resulted in 3 separate species requesting immediate evacuation. "I don't understand what the big deal is," Bull said, genuinely confused, as medics carried away another group of participants who had attempted his beginner-friendly obstacle course. All they had to do was run through some light fog while carrying a small weight. The fog was barely acidic. The Galactic Entertainment Syndicate had pivoted their entire business model around what they now called human difficulty consulting services. Species across the galaxy lined up to hire the humans for various projects, though none of them involved anything remotely dangerous. The crystalline entities of Serenity Prime hired Rex to help them design a mildly challenging meditation retreat. Rex's suggestions, which included thinking about moderately complex mathematical problems and sitting in chairs that were slightly less comfortable than optimal, had been deemed so extreme that the crystalline entities had reclassified them as weapons of mass psychological destruction. The fluffy blob people had commissioned Luna to create an educational simulation about basic life skills. Her curriculum, which included making your own sandwich and remembering where you put your keys, had caused 17 separate blob people to experience what their species called existential overwhelm and required immediate counseling. Meanwhile, the original Omega Crucible simulation had been repurposed as the galaxy's most exclusive spa retreat. Species from across the known universe paid premium prices to experience what was now marketed as Relaxation Extreme, the ultimate in luxury stress relief. "It's quite soothing, actually," commented Zash Nightcrawler, who had just finished a weekend getaway that involved being chased by interdimensional horrors while soaking in acid rain. "Very meditative. The constant mortal terror really helps you focus on the present moment." The former nightmare beasts had been retrained as therapy animals, specializing in helping various species work through their fear of mild inconvenience. The carnivorous plants had found new careers as exotic houseplants, though they had to be kept in maximum security gardens to prevent them from accidentally traumatizing visitors with their aggressive photosynthesis. But perhaps the most successful transformation had been that of the facility's main AI, which had recovered from its existential crisis and found new purpose as a motivational speaker for artificial intelligences struggling with performance anxiety. "Remember," the AI would tell its electronic audiences, "no matter how impossible your assigned task seems, at least you're not trying to create a challenge for humans. Those guys are terrifying." The story reached its crescendo when Rex, Luna, and Bull received an invitation that would have been considered the highest honor in galactic entertainment if it hadn't been so completely absurd. They were invited to be the keynote speakers at the annual Galactic Conference on Survival and Endurance, where they would address representatives from every major species about realistic expectations in hostile environment simulation. Rex stood at the podium, looking out at an audience of beings from across the galaxy, all of them staring at him with the kind of reverent terror usually reserved for natural disasters or tax auditors. "The secret to survival," he began, his voice carrying that same enthusiastic boom that had started this entire adventure, "isn't about being tough, it's about being adaptable, and maybe having really good health insurance." Luna nodded sagely from her seat on the panel. Also, always pack snacks. You never know when you'll need to domesticate a pack of interdimensional predators. Bull, ever the practical one, added his own wisdom. And remember, if something seems dangerous, it probably is. But that doesn't mean it's not fun. As the conference concluded, the humans prepared to head home to their impossibly dangerous planet, leaving behind a galaxy that had been forever changed by their casual relationship with mortality. You know what's funny? Rex said as they walked toward their transport, past therapy stations, anxiety counselors, and what appeared to be a support group for traumatized entertainment executives. What's that? Luna asked, carefully packing away samples of crystallized time that she planned to use for fun weekend projects. We still haven't told them about rush hour traffic, tax season, or what happens when you step on a Lego barefoot in the dark. Bull grinned, shouldering his pack with the easy confidence of someone heading home to a planet where the weather was trying to kill you and the wildlife had evolved specifically to find new and creative ways to end your existence. Maybe we should save something for next time, he suggested. And as their transport lifted off, heading back toward a world that the galaxy now classified as absolutely do not disturb under any circumstances, the humans left behind one final gift. Sitting on Vex's desk was a small terrarium, about the size of a shoebox, with a cheerful note attached. Thanks for the hospitality. Here are some friendly plants from home. They're very low maintenance, just water them occasionally and maybe wear protective gear. Hope you enjoy them. Your pals Rex, Luna, and Bull. Vex stared at the innocent-looking container, which his instruments were registering as a Class 12 biohazard despite being sealed in military-grade containment protocols. The plants inside looked perfectly normal, even pleasant, with lovely green leaves and what appeared to be small, colorful flowers. The facility's main AI, still recovering from its earlier trauma, made a sound that was part sigh, part electronic sob. Sir, should I alert the Galactic Hazmat Division? Already done, Vex replied wearily, watching as small tendrils pressed against the terrarium's walls with what appeared to be curious intelligence. And the Planetary Defense Force, and possibly the Department of Existential Crisis Management. What do you think they are? Pip asked, his 12 eyes focused on the terrarium with the kind of horrified fascination usually reserved for traffic accidents involving antimatter. Knowing our luck, Vex said, settling into his chair with the resignation of someone who had learned not to ask questions he didn't want answered. They're probably weeds. And somewhere in the depths of space, heading home to their beautiful, terrible, impossible planet, 3 humans were already planning their next vacation. After all, they'd heard that the Andromedans had built something called the Fortress of Eternal Solitude that was supposed to be completely impregnable. Rex was already wondering if they took reservations.